There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from holding others' pain. A person becomes known as someone safe, someone you can tell your deepest struggles to, someone who will listen without judgment, someone who will sit with you in your darkest moments and not flinch. And so people come. They come with their trauma, their grief, their secrets, their fears. And this person, the safe space, receives them all. But there is a cost written into this role that no one explicitly names. A cost that accumulates quietly, invisibly, until one day the safe space realizes they have become unsafe for themselves. The person who is everyone's safe space often has no safe space of their own. They give endlessly. They listen without boundary. They take on the emotional weight of other stories and carry it in their own nervous system. They become so focused on being present for others that they disappear from their own lives. And slowly, imperceptibly, something breaks. The compassion becomes exhaustion. The empathy becomes numbness. The generosity becomes resentment. The person who once felt honored to hold others' pain now feels buried beneath it. This is the story of what happens when being a safe space becomes a form of self-destruction. This is the story of the cost of endless compassion. Chapter 1: Recognition, Emotional Beginning. People come to you with their broken pieces. They come because something in their knowing recognizes that you will not turn them away, that you will sit with them in their darkness without trying to fix or minimize or escape, that you have made yourself into a container large enough to hold their pain, and so they pour their stories into you, their trauma, their grief, their secrets, their shame, and you receive it all. You have become someone people call when they are falling apart. You are the person who listens when everyone else has stopped. You are the safe space in an unsafe world. To the outside world, you are known for your empathy, your compassion, your seemingly unlimited capacity to be present for others. And you are proud of this. Or at least you were. But something has shifted, and you are not sure when. There is a tiredness in you that sleep does not touch, a heaviness that you carry even when you are alone, emotions that do not belong to you, anxiety about someone else's situation, grief about someone else's loss, anger about someone else's injustice. These feelings live in your body as though they are your own. You notice that you do not know how to talk about yourself anymore. When someone asks how you are, you deflect. You turn the conversation to them. Because talking about your own struggles feels indulgent, selfish. The world has enough people focused on their own pain. You are the one who carries others. That is your role. That is who you have become. The boundaries you thought you had established have eroded. You tell yourself you will only take on so much, that you will protect your own energy, that you will say no to requests that overwhelm you. But when someone comes to you struggling, something in you breaks. The boundary dissolves, and you say yes. You always say yes. There is also a loneliness in being the safe space, because the person who is safe for others is often not safe for themselves. They do not let others see them struggling. They do not share their own vulnerabilities, because if they did, if they showed cracks, they might become a burden to the people they have positioned themselves to help. And the thought of that is terrifying. So you listen without being heard. You hold without being held. You show up for everyone without knowing if anyone would show up for you. And you are exhausted, not just mentally. Your body is tired, your nervous system is overwhelmed, you are running on fumes, pretending it is fuel, and you are angry. There is a deep anger at the people who keep coming, keep asking, keep taking. But you cannot express this anger because expressing it would mean admitting that you are not actually fine with being the safe space. It would mean admitting that you are drowning, and drowning people do not deserve to take up space with their own needs. So the anger stays inside, it calcifies, it becomes resentment, and it poisons the very compassion you worked so hard to cultivate. Chapter 2: Root Cause, Origins. Every person who is everyone's safe space learned this role somewhere. Some learned it in childhood, a parent who was emotionally unavailable, and so the child became the emotional support. A parent struggling with addiction or mental illness, and the child learned to manage that parent's emotions, to be the stable one, the capable one, the one who could be depended on. These children learned early that being needed was the same as being loved, that if they stopped caring for others, they would be abandoned. Some learned it through trauma. They experienced something painful, and in processing that pain, they discovered that talking about it with others actually helped. So they became the ones who could talk about painful things. They became the ones who could sit with other people's trauma without flinching. And gradually, this became their identity. The one who understands, the one who does not judge, the one who can handle anything. Some learned it through empathy that was never matched. They felt others' emotions so deeply, understood others' struggles so fully, that it seemed natural to orient their lives around helping others feel better. Somewhere along the way, they internalized the belief that their value came from being useful, that love was conditional on meeting others' needs. The root cause is always some form of codependency, a pattern where self-worth becomes attached to being needed, where boundaries feel like abandonment, where saying no feels like betrayal, where the self becomes secondary to the role of caretaker. Codependency is not love. It is a form of control, though it does not feel that way. The codependent person believes they are being generous, but underneath the generosity is a hidden contract. I will take care of you, and in exchange, you will prove that I matter, that I am loved, that I am enough. But that contract can never be fulfilled, because if the other person never fully recovers, never fully becomes independent, then the caretaker can continue to matter. And if the other person does recover, the caretaker loses their usefulness. And usefulness feels like the only thing holding them together. There is also a belief system underneath, that being strong means taking care of everyone but yourself. That being good means being available at all times. That being worthy means being indispensable. These beliefs were often taught implicitly through the way adults responded to vulnerability, the way they reacted to needs, the messages they sent about which emotions were acceptable and which were not. The safe space learned that their emotions were too much, their needs were too burdensome, their vulnerability was a liability. So they learned to suppress their own inner world and become attentive to everyone else's. They learned that safety came through knowing what others needed before they asked, through being prepared, through never being caught off guard by their own needs. And they became very good at this. Too good. So good that they forgot they had needs at all. Chapter 3, Scientific Psychological Explanation. When a person is continuously exposed to others' trauma, something measurable happens in the brain. This is called compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress. It is not metaphorical. It is a real condition with real effects on the nervous system. A person who listens to others' trauma stories, who sits with others' pain, who absorbs others' grief, can develop symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. They can have intrusive thoughts about clients' trauma. They can experience hypervigilance. They can develop avoidance behaviors. They can become emotionally numb. Research shows that 40 to 85% of helping professionals, therapists, nurses, social workers, counselors, develop some form of compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress at some point in their careers. This is not because they are weak. This is because they are human. The human nervous system was not designed to continuously absorb others' pain without consequence. What happens is that the nervous system becomes dysregulated. The person is constantly in a state of activation, listening for distress, preparing to respond to crisis. The amygdala, the threat detection center, becomes hyperactive. The vagus nerve, which regulates the parasympathetic nervous system, becomes strained. The person's own nervous system never gets to fully rest and recover. There is also something called emotional contagion. When you are present with someone who is experiencing intense emotion, your nervous systems become entrained. Their activation becomes your activation. Their fear becomes your fear. And if you have not established boundaries or developed skills to regulate your own nervous system, you will absorb their emotional state as though it is your own. The person who is the safe space is often someone with high empathy. This is a gift. But high empathy without boundaries is a vulnerability. It means the person feels others' pain deeply, genuinely, completely. And over time, taking in that much pain changes the brain. It changes how the person relates to the world. Everything becomes a potential crisis. Everyone is potentially suffering, and the person must be ready to hold all of it. Neuroimaging studies show that the brains of people experiencing compassion fatigue show changes in the areas associated with emotional processing and empathy. These are not permanent changes, but they take time and support to reverse. The person's ability to feel compassion gradually diminishes, not because they want it to, but because the nervous system, overloaded, begins to shut down. There is also a component called secondary traumatization. The person internalizes others' trauma narratives. They begin to hold beliefs about the world that are shaped by the worst things they have heard. The world becomes more dangerous in their mind. People become more harmful. Trust becomes more difficult. And codependency has its own neurological basis. The reward centers in the brain become activated when the person is needed, when they are helping, when someone is dependent on them. Over time, these neural pathways strengthen. The person becomes addicted to the feeling of being needed. When they are not helping, when they are not needed, they feel empty. And so they continue the pattern, seeking out situations where they can be the savior, the helper, the one who has all the answers. The good news is that the nervous system is neuroplastic. It can learn new patterns, but it requires intention, support, and time. Chapter 4. Inner conflict and resistance. The safe space lives in a profound contradiction. On one level, they are proud of their capacity to help. They believe that being available, being compassionate, being the person others can count on is good and right. They have built an identity around being strong for others, and the thought of changing this feels like losing themselves. On another level, they are desperate to escape, they are exhausted, they want to stop, but the guilt that comes with that desire is overwhelming, because who will help these people if they stop? What happens to all the people who depend on them? And if they stop being needed, who are they? There is a deep resistance to setting boundaries. Boundaries feel selfish. They feel like a betrayal of the people who need them. They feel like a violation of the commitment the safe space has made to be available. And so even when they are past their limit, even when they are drowning, they say yes to one more person, one more story, one more crisis. There is also a compulsion to fix. The safe space often feels responsible for other people's well-being in a way that is not actually their responsibility. They believe that if they just listen better, understand better, support better, the other person will recover. And when the other person does not recover, the safe space feels like they have failed. They blame themselves for not doing enough. This creates a cycle of over-effort and disappointment. The safe space works harder and harder, takes on more and more, gives more and more. But the people they are helping do not get better as quickly as the safe space would like, or they do not get better at all. And the safe space becomes increasingly desperate to fix the situation, increasingly willing to sacrifice their own well-being to make a difference. There's also the matter of resentment. The safe space begins to resent the people they are helping. But this resentment is terrifying, because if they feel resentful, it means they are not actually a good person. It means they are not actually selfless. It means the whole identity they have built is false. So the resentment is suppressed, and it grows. And there is no one to process this with, because the safe space cannot be vulnerable with the people they are helping. And the people in their own life have become secondary. Their partner becomes neglected. Their friends become distant. No one knows them anymore because they have become only the role they play. Chapter 5. Turning point, realization. The breaking point comes when the safe space can no longer pretend. Sometimes it is sudden, a complete collapse. The person who has been able to manage everything suddenly cannot get out of bed. The person who has listened to hundreds of trauma stories suddenly cannot hear one more. The person who has been strong for everyone suddenly has no strength left. Sometimes it is gradual, a slow recognition that they have lost themselves, that they cannot remember what they enjoy, and that they do not know what they want, that the only thing they know how to do is show up for other people, and the thought of that continuing for the rest of their life is suffocating. Sometimes it comes through a relationship breaking. The person they love finally says, "You are not here. You are not available. You are not present for me because you have given everything away." And in that moment, the safe space sees themselves through another's eyes and realizes the cost of what they have done. Sometimes it comes through therapy. Someone finally holding up a mirror and reflecting back. You are drowning. This is not sustainable. You cannot help anyone if you are drowning yourself. The turning point is when the safe space realizes that the very thing they have built their identity around, being the person who holds others, is destroying them. It is when they finally admit, "I cannot do this anymore." And this admission is both devastating and liberating. It is devastating because it means acknowledging that being the safe space was not actually helping. It was harming, both themselves and, in subtle ways, the people they were trying to help. Because you cannot genuinely care for someone if you are dying inside. Authentic care requires wholeness, and they had sacrificed their wholeness. But it is liberating because for the first time they give themselves permission to step back, to rest, to say no without apology, to admit that they are not okay. And in that admission, something fundamental shifts. They are no longer alone. They are no longer carrying this alone. Chapter 6. Healing and integration. Healing from being the safe space for everyone is about learning to become the safe space for yourself. It starts with the recognition that self-care is not selfish, that boundaries are not rejection, that saying no to one person's need is not the same as not caring, that you can be compassionate and also be protected. It looks like learning to cry, to admit struggle, to let people know you are not fine, and to experience the profound relief that comes when you realize that people can love you even when you are broken, that your value is not contingent on being useful. It looks like rebuilding a sense of self that exists independent of being needed. What do you actually want? What brings you joy? What do you believe in separate from what you think you should believe? These questions may feel impossible to answer if you have spent years focused on others. But slowly, with intention and support, the answers emerge. It looks like reestablishing boundaries. This is not punishment. This is protection. A boundary is a statement. I am responsible for my own well-being, and I can be kind and caring within the boundaries that keep me whole. It looks like learning to receive, to let others help you, to be vulnerable with people you trust, to allow the support you have given others to come back to you. This is perhaps the hardest part, because receiving feels like losing control, but it is actually the most powerful act of integration. It looks like grieving the years spent in service to others, grieving the relationships that were damaged by your unavailability, grieving the self that was lost in the effort to be everything for everyone, and then slowly finding yourself again. It involves therapy, working with someone to understand the roots of the codependency, to recognize the patterns, to practice new ways of being in relationship. It involves learning to tolerate discomfort, because setting boundaries will be uncomfortable. People may be disappointed. And you have to learn that their disappointment is not your responsibility. It involves building a life that includes your own needs. Rest is not selfish. Joy is not indulgent. Spending time on yourself is not betrayal. These are essential parts of wholeness, And wholeness is what allows genuine care to flow from you rather than desperate self-abandonment. Chapter 7. Poetic Closure. Reflection. There is a particular kind of strength in someone who can be compassionate without losing themselves. It is the strength of someone who has learned that being a safe space for others begins with being a safe space for themselves. Someone who can listen deeply and still hold boundaries. Someone who can care profoundly and still take care. Someone who can be strong for others without sacrificing their own foundation. This is not the absence of compassion, it is compassion integrated with wisdom, it is empathy tempered with boundaries. It is generosity that is sustainable because it is not born from self-abandonment. The person who is everyone's safe space, who learned that being needed was the only way to matter, can become someone different. Someone who knows they matter simply because they exist. Someone who can give because they choose to, not because they must. Someone who is available not from depletion, but from fullness. This is what integration looks like, not rejecting the capacity to care, but learning to care in a way that does not destroy you in the process. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you have been the safe space for others while being unsafe for yourself, know this. Your compassion is not a flaw. Your empathy is not a weakness. Your capacity to sit with others' pain is a gift. But gifts are not meant to destroy the giver. They are meant to be offered from wholeness, not from desperation. They are meant to be given freely, not forced out of obligation. You can keep your compassion. You do not have to become hard or closed, but you can protect yourself. You can say no. You can take care of your own well-being with the same dedication you have given to others. You can be the safe space for others while also being the safe space for yourself. And in that integration, something beautiful happens. You become someone who can truly help, not from a place of self-sacrifice, but from a place of wholeness. Not from an attempt to earn worth, but from the recognition that you already matter. You become the safe space that sustains itself. And in sustaining yourself, you discover that you can sustain others too. Not by drowning yourself, but by standing on solid ground. Not by absorbing their pain, but by bearing witness to it. Not by losing yourself, but by showing them what wholeness looks like. The exhausted safe space becomes the integrated healer. And that is a gift far greater than the exhausted version could ever give.